Hi guys, welcome to our first lecture for week 2. Our next lecture will be on Tuesday and Wednesday at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. Today we're going to go through the final announcements. We're going to look at the announcements, the final project overview. We're going to look at the week 2 overview and the discussion for week 2 and talk a little bit more about user interface and user experience. Christy is our learning coach. Her flyer will be posted by tomorrow. She hasn't sent it to me yet. So as soon as I get that, I will post it. But just a reminder, I will be in the SSC tonight from 6 to 9, on Thursday from 8 to 11 p.m. Mountain Time, and on Friday from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. Mountain Time. So if you need help with this week's stuff, be sure to come in and see me. And just as a reminder, so we keep our focus, the final project we started working on last week, and that's what you did your storyboard on. All of the storyboards I received were amazing, guys. And pat yourselves on the back. You guys did an excellent job. This is probably the best work I've seen, and I've taught this class several times now, and you guys have really rocked it. You guys did an awesome job. So this week, we are going to be taking that storyboard and creating those final graphics and starting to set up our animate file. This week's work is actually, as far as animate goes, this week's assignment work is going to be pretty simple. You're going to spend your most of your time developing your graphics this week. The discussion this week, of course, is worth 60 points, the assignment 120, and the assessment 80 points, which is a total of 260 points. During this next development stage, your story will develop even further. It may need adjustments to accommodate technology restrictions or assets that may be better shown in a way slightly different than you conceptualized in your storyboard. This is common when first starting out because you are still learning the software to create your animation. Looking at your instructor's feedback from your storyboard will give you directions on whether your concept will work as an animated advertisement. This week, you revised your storyline. If needed, if you need to revise your storyline. I don't think there was anyone I actually had to have them revised. It was anything but just simple adjustments here and there. Otherwise, I'm telling you guys had the best work that I have seen in all the classes I have taught. So you guys did an awesome job. And this week, you're going to start creating your objects in Illustrator or Animate for your storyboard concept. So our objectives this week are to define user experience and describe how it relates to animated advertising. Evaluate your animated story concept and revise for deployment, keeping UX in mind. Create finished artwork for your animation by drawing the assets for your storyboard sketches. Show proficiency in animated objects or assets over time. That's going to be where the assessment comes in. The assignment specifically this week is you will take and draw your assets in finished form for your storyboard sketches. Your document for submission will be an Animate CC. You're going to set up the stage, the final sizes you determined in your storyboard, so make sure the ratios are even. So if you had a square in your storyboard, then make sure your artboard's a square. If you had a banner in your storyboard, make sure it's banner sized and animate. At this point, animating isn't necessary, but all of your backgrounds, characters, graphics, type, etc. should be refined and in final form ready for your animating. Any assets you draw in Illustrator will need to be imported into Animate CC and placed on the stage. Avoid bringing text from Illustrator, but rather type it in Animate CC. Again, animation at this point is not necessary. You're just going to be moving stuff into Animate and getting things ready to animate next week. You're going to create a new ActionScript 3 document to be able to use all the drawing tools available using Adobe Animate CC. You will be able to convert this to an HTML5 Canvas document in week 3 when you will be animating your project. Since there will be various published files created for this project for the remainder of the mod, it is highly recommended you create a folder that will hold all your files, so you will be able to easily identify which files belong to which published output. Name your file DES246, assignment 2, your first name and last name, and submit it for grading. Now then, I strongly recommend that you start out with an HTML5 Canvas file from the start. Don't make the ActionScript 3 file. Go ahead and make it an HTML5 Canvas file. It will be much easier on you than trying to convert it from ActionScript 3, which is AS3, to an HTML5 Canvas file. You'll save yourself some time. You're not being graded on the fact that it is a ActionScript 3 document. Make it an HTML5 Canvas so that you do not have to convert it. If you create your file as HTML5 Canvas, it will create many files and add assets that will be required to submit when the HTML document for grading. So, if you wish to work in the HTML5 Canvas environment in Animate CC, zip all files that are created for grading. Name the archive file DS246 assignment 2 first name last name .zip. Just submitting the HTML page will result in 0 points, and no on-time points will be awarded if this is the only file that is submitted by the deadline. Be sure to turn in that .fla file. In reality, this is in your instructions, but guys, this week all you're doing is setting up your artboard and importing your images into Animate, so you're really not going to have all those files because you don't have to publish this week. So you're not going to have that HTML file or anything like this. I think it was an oversight when they set up this class and put this in here, but the reality is you're not actually going to have all those files because you do not have to zip this week because there's no animation. You are just setting up your artboard. So go ahead and start with that HTML5 Canvas file. That way next week you don't have to try and convert that file into an HTML5 Canvas file. Your discussion this week. I am sure we have all heard the buzzword UX, user experience. But what does it really mean when it comes to animated advertisements? First, revise your brief concept description from your instructor's critique that you submitted in week 1. Share your revised paragraph describing your animation. Find 3 resources. Don't forget to cite them that define UX and animation and summarize the definition in your own words. After reading and comprehending what they are telling you, in your own words, describe how your concept for your final project will achieve a good user experience. In your replies to fellow classmates, give your feedback of what they have explained and suggestions of how they may improve their concept on UX. If you are commenting on someone's concept that you think is great, tell them why. So let's talk a little bit about user experience. User experience responsibilities. Now, if you were the graphic designer in charge of making sure UX was met, the type of things you would do are: user experience design is a process of development and improvement of quality interaction between a user and all facets of a company. So think about that a minute. If you have an animation and you have to think about interaction between the user and the company, what kind of things do you think you could include in your animation that would guarantee that type of interaction? Most of you did this and probably didn't realize that you were doing this step. Most of you had some sort of spot in your animation where the user was asked to click. Click on this for more information, click here to order now, that sort of thing. A lot of you had those type of things. Guess what? That is the interaction between the user and the company. Now, if your animated ad was on another website instead of the company's website, what kinds of things would help increase that interaction? What kind of things would you need to make sure were included in that animation?
It's back to your page where you can finish the
A
sale.
link, yep, like their web address.
Where you can finish the sale.
Yes. Their phone number, easy access, absolutely. Their phone number, their logo, all of that will help increase interaction. User experience design is responsible for being hands-on with the process of research, testing, development, content, prototyping to test for quality results. What that means in the graphic designer standpoint is, guess what? You're going to be the person that gets that final thing. Someone sets it in front of you and says, okay, now we need to make sure this works. So you do things like, you're going to test it yourself, but usually you create some sort of testing panel. Meaning it could be people you work with, it could be your friends and family. Generally, you want to try to stay within the target market the company has hired you to create for, and just have some random people test it. Take a look at it, tell you what they think. If there's stuff that needs to be changed or things that you notice when you test it the first time, wait a minute, that word's spelt wrong, this is done wrong, that's not in alignment. You have to go back and have that person fix those things. And then it comes back to you again, and the process kind of starts all over again until you finally get a finished product, which is a prototyping. That's before it goes live. That prototyping will be what's sent to the company, saying, okay, here's the final approval. When you're ready to go, it's ready to go live. And so they will take that prototype and they will play with it. They will view it, mess with it, maybe even have a secondary person look at it, especially if they have an IT department and they're planning on putting this on their website. They will send it to their IT department who's in charge of their website and have them test it, make sure it's going to work, that sort of thing. So at some point you might find yourself in that situation. And you're going to be the person that has to look at the final step and say, okay, here's what we need to do, and do a controlled study, just like Corley said there, and have random people test it. And then you're going to have to make sure it's published and in all of its final files, has all the content that the company's going to need to put it on their website, and you send a prototype to them. User experience design is, in theory, a non-digital cognitive science practice, but used and defined predominantly by digital industries. We sort of talked about this a little last week when I was talking about user experience is actually in everything we do. Everything we do, we experience, right? Now, do we stop and think about these experiences all the time? No, not usually. Usually, we will acknowledge those experiences if it's something really good or really bad. But it can be anything from buying a car, buying a furniture, shopping online. All of those kinds of things are creating experience. All of those things involve user experience. And so you have to kind of stop and think back and think, okay, how is that going to relate to my animation? Well, your user is going to be the one experiencing, right? So when you test your designs, when you go back and you're watching next week, when you're testing the first time, you're in that first stage of testing before we get to week 4. you're going to basically have to turn off that graphic designer part of you. And you're going to suddenly have to become the user. And you're going to have to watch it from that perspective. Because sometimes it's necessary to break those rules that you guys are so familiar with at this point. Because when watching the animation live, the rules have been met, but that scene just looks a little funny. It would be better if it was off balance or something like that that's going to cause you to break one of those rules. And you're not going to see that unless you step back and turn off that graphic designer part and sit down as the user. Does that make sense? Sometimes it's really hard to do that, but that is the easiest way to tell right up front whether or not you need to make some adjustments before you turn in that prototype to me. This is a really great quick video on good user experience that helps kind of put it into perspective. Gives you some things to relate to as far as technology, animation, that sort of thing goes. Now, can you, I can't even hear that one. Oh, there it goes. Okay, let me pull it up on the web. It's going to be driving me nuts again today.
Yes, clean.
Share my Google Chrome.
Consistent.
Let's rewind this.
Design matters.
There we go.
User experience. What is a good user experience? It's more than just optimizing your user interface. Yes, clean, consistent, and compelling design matters. But if it doesn't help you do more or do something better, then it's only superficial at best. Instead, what if you could simplify everything in line with the tasks and activities relevant to your job? The interface, the interaction, and the functionality, all tailored seamlessly to what you want and need. Nothing more, nothing less. Now, imagine you have that same experience across everything you do, on any device, and for everyone in your organization. That's harnessing the power of technology to simplify your life. By delivering an experience focused on your needs and way of working, your productivity soars, putting you in control of the experience and not the other way around. In the end, what makes a good user experience really great is when you don't even have to think about it. You just get your job done. Run simple.
Okay, now you're going to find a lot of research on when you research user experience, you're going to find a lot of stuff pulled up for the web itself. Because user experience is a big thing in web design. What you guys are going to have to do is take what you're learning there, and it may be in regards to it may be in regards to website design, but what you need to do is simply relate that to animation, because the reality is any animation you're making is going to go straight on the web.
User experience.
It's going to go straight on the web. So technically it is actually part of a web page. So keep that in mind when you're doing your research, because you're going to find a lot of stuff that simply relates to web design. But your animation is going on the web. So those things that they're talking about actually relate to your animated ads. So be sure you're thinking about that when you're reading. Okay, well, how does that relate to an animated ad? Well, there's going to be a lot of things in there. It's going to talk about, like we just spoke about, links and buttons and easy access, responsiveness. It's going to talk about all of those type of things. Now, here's another little short video on user experience too. It touches on some stuff the other video didn't.
User experience design, untangling the knot. User experience design, or UX, captures the engagement a person has with a thing. A well-designed product or service eliminates negativity and creates positive experiences. Users decide upon entering your website within 10 seconds whether to continue or exit and move on. Happy people tell other people, who tell other people how excited they are about your product, which is why it is so important to create a positive user experience by either solving a problem or satisfying a need. Designing experiences begins by finding out as much as we can about what drives our customers. Discovering user needs helps us understand why people do the things they do and supports the company behind the product or service, forming the critical bond between business needs and customer needs. But watch out! When user experience design is applied is critical. UX is not the icing on the cake, but the cake itself. Design early. When someone meets your product for the first time, you have 10 seconds to grab them or lose them. So in my role as a UX designer, I turn that which is hard to explain into something which is easy to understand, and change goals which are difficult to achieve into tasks that are simple to do, which makes your product look better and makes people want to come back to you instead of going to your competition. UX just makes it all so much better.
Now, before we talk about the information we saw in that video, I want you guys to tell me, what did you think of that video? What did you notice? What stood out to you?
The writing and the woman's voice.
The writing and the woman's voice.
Yes, absolutely. That was nothing more than voiceover, and it was actually computer generated. It was simple, right? That drawing wasn't even major. I mean, those were pretty simple drawings. The animation itself in that animation was pretty simple, but it was effective. It had a few extras, like shadowing in the letters, adding the little yellow tips around the important information. Some text was red, those sort of things. And all of that, in the end, guides the user and what we were watching, right? It was also entertaining. It kept our attention. And like it said, very important, 10 seconds. And I want to tell you, 10 seconds is a very long time. The reality is, when a user starts watching your animation, you probably have about 3 seconds. Whether they're going to keep watching or they're not. Think about the animations, animated ads you've seen on the internet and things like that. How many of them do you stop and watch? And how long does it take for you to decide whether you're watching it or you're moving on down the page to look for the stuff you were on that page to look for in the first place?
As long as it takes to read that first sentence, I guess.
Pretty quickly.
As long as it takes to read that first sentence, I guess.
Yeah, so you're talking just a very couple, 10 seconds is actually very lenient, because the reality is you really don't have that long. You've got at most about 3 seconds. So you have to make sure your animation starts with kind of a bang, right? That it really gets moving. And there's not some sort of slow beginning, that there shouldn't be a build-up. When you're making a 30-second animated ad, there's not a build-up. It should start strong, end strong, because that's the only way you're going to get a consumer, a user, to watch that ad for 30 seconds. Because if it starts slow, within the first 2-3 seconds, they're bored and it's time to move on. So you have to start strong, end strong. Make sure you get their attention at the get-go. So now, as far as the UX goes in animation, the 10 seconds is a very important part of that, which is in reality more like 3. But as you saw, is user experience is more of the whole shebang, not the icing as it described. It's like the container for everything else. It's the container for your design, the container for your user interface, because without all of that, you don't get user experience. But with that said, without user experience, it's really hard to have the rest of it, right? Because then it's not likely to work, because you haven't taken into account the interface it needs to be in, that sort of thing. So be sure that you keep those in mind with your ads. You may have to go back and you may have to make a few adjustments in order to get your user experience where you need it to be. So just when you go back, look at your storyboard and think about the user experience. Is this all going to work? And it may look perfectly fine now, and next week, when you start actually animating it and rewatching it, you figure out that, nope, that's not going to work. If I change this, the user experience is going to be much better. If I don't start with a blank screen, user experience is going to be better because it's going to be the first thing they see. So I need to put something there instead of having that blank screen. So those little adjustments are no big deal, and they're common even for experienced designers. I still make adjustments to my animations. Once I start getting them animated, usually, I'd say about 80% of the time, probably, I have made some sort of adjustment that's different from my storyboard. And I do it because in the end, what I saw in my head and put on that storyboard didn't quite work out in the animation. So I changed it so that it was better. So don't be afraid to make those changes. It's expected. It's what I expect to happen with all of you, to have to make some sort of adjustment or change in your animation. So it's going to be a little different than your storyboard. Now, if you're going to have to make some drastic change, meaning you've decided to scrap the whole thing and start over, that is when you need to give me an explanation. It doesn't have to be lengthy or anything like that. Just a small comment in the comments box when you submit that you're changing the entire design because the user interface wasn't working, because the user experience just wasn't happening, so you've made it better. Just make sure you let me know that, yes, you've changed it, so that when I open it, I'm not going, what happened here? Tell me why you changed it. Doesn't have to be anything lengthy. But the small changes you don't have to worry about. Just go with them. But if you decide to make some very large changes, be sure you explain to me, why that happened. It just wasn't working with Animate. The motion didn't look like I thought it should have. Whatever the case may be, and that you decided to change that, just let me know what it is. Make sense? Okay, guys, well, every time I've taught this class, I've kind of decided to do something different with you guys. Every time I've taught this class, this week always becomes the hardest, when the reality is it should be a pretty quick week for you guys. And it all comes down to doing those final graphics, because all of you have different experience. All of you have been in school at a different length of time. Some of you have had the advanced class, so your drawing skills are where they need to be, and some of you haven't. And as graphic designers, even though I've told you you're not being graded on these graphics themselves, you're being graded on the animation, I do understand the fact as graphic designers, you still want everything to look good. That is a very important trait to have, and so I don't want you to ignore it. You are not being graded on those graphics, but I've decided this month that what I will do, we're going to have a short lecture today, and we're almost done. What I will do is tomorrow we will use for drawing day. So you can do one of two things. You can email me, tell me the type of graphic you're going to need drawn, and I can demo it tomorrow. Or you can come in, you can share your screen, and I will walk you through creating it. If you would like me to demo it, please try to shoot me an email by, let's say, 11 o'clock tomorrow, so I have time to at least plan it out. And we will demo those graphics so that it'll help you a little bit. We'll go over some of the tools. I don't know how many of you have been introduced to the Pathfinder tools yet, but those are advanced drawing tools. And they come in really handy, especially when making graphics for animated ads. So we will do things like that. Does that sound good to everybody? Because I don't want you guys to stress over these graphics, but I also want you to have the opportunity to increase your drawing skills here too. So we will do that tomorrow, and you can either email me and I will demo that specific graphic. Just make sure you give me a description of what you want it to look like. Otherwise, you're going to get what I see in my head, and that may not necessarily be what you're visualizing. So be sure you give me a description, make it as accurate as you can, and I can demo it, or you can share your screen and I'll walk you through creating it. It's good for you guys to see each other work, because you guys tend to, especially when you're on the same level and you've had the same classes and that sort of thing, because you tend to think a lot alike, because you've all learned the same thing up to that point. And that thinking changes over time as you advance your skills. So it's good for you guys to see each other work, because the same questions you have may be the same questions somebody else has if I'm telling you what to do. And you're actually physically doing it, because then questions are happening. Well, okay, but if I do this in the future, can I use this tool on something else? And I can explain how that works. Whereas when I'm demoing it, I don't always think about those questions that you guys may have. I try to address as much as I can, but I don't always hit everything, because it's been a very long time since I've been a student, at least of graphic design, not a student of computer science. So does that sound good to everybody? Okay, then I think what you can expect tomorrow, just so you guys can plan, is tomorrow's lecture will probably be 2 hours. That will give us enough time to go through the tools and things like that and get graphics design that you need designed and things like that. So just plan on tomorrow's lecture being, it's full length, which will be 2 hours. Otherwise, guys, then you have time this evening to go back to your storyboard and look and see if there's a specific graphic in that storyboard that you know you're going to need help with. And decide whether you want me to walk you through designing it so you have the final graphic when we're done, or if you just want me to demo it and then you can go back and watch the lecture later and do it yourself. That's completely up to you. But if you want me to demo it, be sure you email me so that I know how many demos I'm going to have to do. Otherwise, I will just walk you through them and we'll just go until we're done. So you have time tonight to think about that. So be sure you pull up your storyboard and take a look. And then we'll go through tomorrow and talk about those graphics and demo them and walk you through them. So that will be it tonight, guys. So tomorrow we will do that, because getting them into Animate is going to be really quick. The most time you're going to spend is on your graphics. Otherwise, you're just moving them into Animate and saving the file. And we will do that part of the assignment demo on Wednesday along with the assessment demo. And tomorrow we will concentrate on just drawing. All right, guys, have a good day. I'll see you guys tomorrow.